Campbell's comments now. Downtown Daylesford. Anne Maree Conroy, hello.
G'day, Paul.
What a beautiful little spot we've got to have a little chat about you winning the 2021 Pearl Kelly Award, just recently announced. So firstly on that, congratulations.
Thanks, Paul. It was a massive thrill.
Now, I don't do these through any sponsorship. People know that I have sponsorships. I just want to promote people that win the awards. But we are going to give a huge wrap here. It's written up there for me as well, but the Royal Daylesford Hotel, it's a brilliant place. It's got so many nooks and crannies about it, so well done. And I must say thank you very much for letting us be here. And also we get to have a cafe latte while we're doing these interviews, something John Campbell never gave me.
Yeah, well, we're very lucky. We train a horse for the guys that own this hotel. So I thought it was a nice fit to come here, have a chat. And we're working hard on getting their horse going. So they appreciate that. And we really appreciate them letting us use this facility.
Easy place to promote this time of year, Daylesford. It is a pea super outside, but that's actually what Daylesford is about. Like, I mean, you want to escape somewhere. I'll get the tourism job here, but it's a perfect sort of Daylesford day, isn't it? It's a dreary day. Get inside, have some nice meals, and enjoy what Daylesford has to offer. It is a unique place. It must be a unique place to train.
It is. I grew up here, so I've seen a lot of change, but lots of people come here, and it's just a nice place to come and have a meal. There's spas everywhere. You can get outside and roam around the lakes or have a swim in the summertime and enjoy the spas. But in the winter, equally, it's nice to get inside and have a spa, have a coffee, have some luxury, and it's a bit of a luxury place now.
I must recommend their coffees as well. Your journey in harness racing, I said you just there as was starting this interview. Did you know a lot about Pearl Kelly? And I think there's a lot of similarities with you. Obviously, the struggles that she had to get driving back in the day, not as evident as for yourself. But you've come through a very different era, and I can say that because we are a similar age. And you've seen a lot of change, especially for ladies in the industry. It must be a huge eye-opener for yourself from when you started to where it's got to right now.
Yeah, it is, Paul, and it seems extraordinary now to think that in the 70s, I think it was about 1978, that women were finally allowed to drive against the men, and that sounds so ridiculous, and the girls now coming along wouldn't even be able to understand women were allowed to drive against the men. You know, they weren't permitted before that to drive in normal races.
I think that's one of the big things that you just said there too, is allowed, because some people are going to say, oh, such and such won in 76. There are ladies that have won before. They were in lady drivers only races. Yeah. A lot of those were non-betting races or only exhibition races. And it was the strides that not just Pearl Kelly made, there was a lot of other ladies behind that really opened it up. And I think it's great for the industry. And last night, it's not about the racing, but last night, we have Alan Tormey, Abby Sanderson get a double. It's commonplace. It's not something that we herald. It's just like, yep, right, well, the girls have done it again, so let's just move on and get to the next day. Julie Douglas trained for winners. Like I say, it's just accepted. So, how old were you when you started in the industry? Like, how old? I know you're born into it, so it's probably a silly question, but when you really started to develop a love of harness racing?
I was a bit of a late starter, Paul. When I was in high school, I was going to pony club, and I thought that I wanted to be an equestrian, and I used to ride in shows similar to your daughter Holly. I was mad on riding, so I was doing some show jumping, and then when I was doing pony club and doing my K certificate at pony club, one of the electives that you could choose was to ride 25 mile. So I did that, and then from that rode a 35 mile endurance ride. Went terrible, vetted out, did everything wrong, didn't give the horse enough water, had a long coat on him so he didn't dry out properly, didn't know how to look after him to get his heart rate down. I think he went lame, I overrode him, did everything wrong, and cried all the way home. And I thought, I love this. So,
Some people say, well, that's it, I'm never doing it again. You're the complete opposite.
no, I thought I like this. So the vet explained to me on the day, he said, this horse that you've got is not suitable. So it wasn't just me, but I'd done everything wrong, but the horse wasn't suitable. So I told my dad, and my dad said, well, we'll get you one that is suitable. So he tried to buy a horse off a bloke that he had seen at the endurance ride. When we came in the gate, Dad had a really good eye for a horse, and he said, I like that horse. So he found out who the bloke was, and he was a big old bloke up at Gunbower, and the horse was a big Anglo-Arab, and Dad rang up and said, he wanted to buy the horse, and the bloke said, no, I've got quite a few people looking to buy this horse, and Dad was keen, and then Dad told him about me, and he said, no, a 15-year-old girl wouldn't handle this horse. He said, it threw me off at the ride, and Dad said, she'll handle it. And Dad always had tremendous faith in me. And he said, no, a young girl would not handle this horse. And Dad said, you don't know the girl. And I was listening, and I was thinking, oh, Dad, So Dad ended up buying the horse, and we went up to Bendigo and picked him up. We went halfway and met the bloke and picked him up. And he used to pull like a train. He used to, I'd come back and I'd have blisters on my hands, blisters on my knees, and I just couldn't hold him. But he was a terrific horse, and I learned how to train from that horse. I still made mistakes, but I learned how to train a horse, and I won my second endurance ride. I won with him, and then I won pretty much everything, and he won Horse of the Year, Junior Horse of the Year in Victoria that first year that I had him. And he was just a terrific horse, Apache, and Dad just picked him out from when we drove in the gate that day. So.
Do you think Dad had ulterior motives, that it wasn't a push-button horse? I mean, the guy obviously was trying to say, this 15-year-old little girl needs a push-button horse to be able to, whereas Dad's like, no, she doesn't want to. She needs to be able to evolve and learn. Do you think so?
I don't know. I really don't know, and I couldn't even... I've never thought about it that way, Paul. I just thought, now I've got this horse, I'll have a go, and I had instant success. So I still made mistakes with him. He used to brush his shin a little bit, and I put an old set of shin boots on him and nearly bowed his tendon. Another time I rode him through sort of a grid thing and damaged him, and then another day I overrode him and I didn't know about electrolytes, and I gave him the thumps, but I learned a lot from that. So, people think that I might be new to training, but I've been training horses since I was a little girl. So when I had my first pony, I was quite frightened of it, and I didn't ride it much, and Mum and Dad bought me this a mare and foal, and then I was terrified of the mare, and then when the foal got broken in, I was a bit more comfortable with him. I was a little bit older. I always say, Dad bought me my first pony when I was 7, and I was hopeless. I shouldn't have had a pony. And I can remember my mum saying to me, if you don't work that horse 6 days a week, I'll take it off you. And that really resonated with me. So all my life I thought, geez, if I don't work this horse 6 days a week at least, my mum will take it off me. So, even now, every horse I've got works 6 or 7 days a week,
I think that is one thing. A lot of standardbred people will be watching this, but if there's not, I think that's one thing that is key, because I know with my own daughter, people say, how many times a week does she ride a horse? And it's like, well, within reason. She's got too many now, but I think that's sort of one of those that separates people that are determined to make it, if you like, and then there's these other kids that are just happy to ride a horse, go once a month to pony club and evolve. Say they want to do horses all their life, but they just don't know. So obviously Mum and Dad saw some determination when you were 7. Dad goes and buys this horse that another horseman says, no, that won't be suitable, and he's like, no, this is where she's at and where she's ready for. And then, as you said, Apache probably taught you as much as you trained him.
Yes.
Apache probably says, now, listen, you mucked this up, I'll carry you through it, and we'll sort the issues out later on. But we just need to have a bit of a discussion about it.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't from lack of trying. It's just that you need to make some mistakes, and
I think you need to be honest about them too.
Yeah.
That's always, I think, one of the keys. And that, did you ever the quilty? How did you go with the quilty?
Yes, I did, and it's really funny that you should ask, Paul, because when I was coming here today, Mum said, "Make sure you tell Paul that you've got a quilty buckle," and then she put it in my hand. I've got it. Mum said, "Paul won't know that you've got a quilty buckle," and I said, "Paul will know." So yes, I've got a quilty buckle, and that comes from, I went to Landsborough the year before Landsborough got the Victorian quilty, and I won the 80k lightweight ride there, and they were talking about having the quilty there, and I thought, well, maybe this is my chance. So I had been to a quilty as a strapper in New South Wales, but I'd never been to attempt it. So I put in 12 months pretty much trying, planning out which rides I would go to, which lead-up rides, how far I would ride. And that was a massive year. I remember there was one part of the bush near here that there's a really big hill, and I went up it the last time before I went to the quilty. I went up that hill 5 times. I was doing a loop, and I was building up, and I kept doing this loop, and I met a guy, and he was walking, and he said to me, "Geez, your horse is skinny." And I said, "Yeah, I'm pretty skinny too, mate." I said, we're training for an endurance ride. And I said, "Yeah, that's why we're both so skinny, because we're getting ready for the quilty." And that brings me to another story. I hadn't been in the habit of using a breastplate on my horse, but because he'd lost weight, the saddle started to slip, and I had to put a breastplate on him. So it was about a week or so before the quilty, and I worked in one night, and I put the breastplate on him. It was just a leather breastplate without a cover, and I was riding along the road, and he felt lame, and I went back to Dad, and I was so wound up, I was so stressed out, I just burst into tears, and I said to Dad, "He's lame, it's the quilty on the weekend, he's lame." And Dad said, "Well, give me a look at him." He said, "Has he just been shod?" And I said, "Yeah." And Dad said, "Well, we'll take the nails out of his shoe, we'll check this, we'll check that." And then all of a sudden Dad looked at him and he said, "Have you clipped him?" And I said, "Yeah." And Dad said, "I think that's your problem." He said, you've clipped him, and he said the leather's touching him on the chest, and that's why he's lame. And that was the answer. But I don't have Dad to refer to now, but that was me making another mistake, but Dad caught it this time. But yeah, I'm getting emotional about it now,
Yeah,
it was such a big thing.
What it meant, I'll let you compose yourself as that. And a lot of people may wonder what is the quilty. It's a Tom Quilty, I think is the first name, but it's the equivalent of the Melbourne Cup. I was trying to think when you were talking there, what's the best race to compare it to, and it is the Melbourne Cup, because it is not one race. It's not a Hunter Cup, if you like, or a Miracle Mile. It's a lead up, it's conditioning, it's a Bart Cummings preparation that you have to be ready, and you have to have everything right on the day. And it is definitely not stake money, but it's but as far as the endurance riders, to give it some comparison, it is really a Melbourne Cup race where you need to be conditioned, rider, horse. Everything needs to be spot on the day, and you can't afford to be a little bit off, because you won't win.
No, well, it's riding 100 miles in one day. So you start at midnight, and it used to be held in New South Wales. It was always held in this one spot in New South Wales. And then, I don't know how many years ago, it started going around the states. So this was my chance to do it in Victoria. And so 300 of us rode up a dusty road at midnight from the Landsborough Sports Ground, all with our little lights on our hats. And people that are in endurance used to say to me, "Isn't harness racing scary? Don't you get scared?" And as I'm going up the road with 300 mostly Arabs, and all dancing and prancing, and we were all quite close, and it wasn't a staggered start. We all took off quite close, and we're barreling up the road, 300 horses and riders at midnight in the dark, in the pitch dark. I thought, now this is scary.
It is. It's familiarisation. What you do all the time is not scary. It's just what people perceive it as. So I think that's always one of the keys. Did you ever have another crack at it, or don't tell me you're just 1 for 1?
I'm 1 for 1, but I had previously ridden 100 mile. The state championships were at Myrtleford years ago, and I took an Arab that I had, Luke. I don't know if you remember the horse that I ended up giving to Keith Pratt.
Yes.
He was
used to eat everyone's sandwiches.
Yes, big fatty then. Yeah. Keith Pratt's last endurance horse that he had, that was Luke, my horse. And that's another story. But Luke was very lazy, so I don't know how many were in that state championships, but we went up the road at midnight then, and after I'd been riding for about 20 minutes, I thought, I'm dead last. I am last of this group. But Luke was very suited to long distance because the further he went, the better he went. So he wasn't pulling, you didn't have to restrain him. You were urging him on, and then when he warmed up to it,
he got there.
I remember at about the 75-mile mark, he was travelling the best that he'd ever gone for me. He'd never gone 75 mile before, but he got the 100, and I've got a top 10 rug from that. I started passing people. You know, I came from last, and all day I was passing people, and but having a very easy ride. And I've got either a top 5 or a top 10 rug from both the state championships and the quilties. So, but a lot of planning went into that. I think at that time when I rode the quilty on the other horse, I was probably the only person using deafeners on their horse because
bit of Bob influence, or
definitely. When I was a little kid roaring around on horses that I couldn't stop, Dad was always saying to me, "Put some cotton wool in their ears." And I used to think, I don't think you can. Like, I'd never seen anyone else do it, and I'd never heard of anyone doing it, so I didn't think that I could do it. And Dad was always saying to me, "Put some cotton wool in their ears." So now I see that, you know, hoods are commonplace, and lots of equestrians use deafeners, hoods, but in those days we didn't, so I didn't think that
those
I
ridden
should.
horse people are a little bit behind the times. You now see, I don't know how many you see now with the red hoods on to get them around to the start, the thoroughbreds, just to keep them that bit quieter. I mean, where have they been all this time? They miss it. Do you miss the endurance? Like, I mean, we're going to get onto your trotting career because it's not actually, because this discussion is about you and your journey, but do you actually miss it? I think you do. But
I do, but I miss riding more than anything. I miss having that fitness, the way you carry yourself, and for me, just, you know, that posture. I think you carry yourself a different way when you're very fit and you ride. So
will you get back riding? Like you say, you miss it. Like, I mean, you're going to say, we're both going to say we're not that old. We are old, but I mean, is it the sort of thing that you could see yourself potentially getting back into a little bit later on?
I don't know. When Lincoln was a little fella, I did go and do a training ride when Lincoln was about 2 or 3, and he enjoyed going and throwing sticks in the fire and camping and that sort of thing. But, excuse me, I pretty much had to give it away when I had Lincoln, because it's something, if you're going to do it, you have to be very dedicated to.
Yeah, but no, you're right. I do know also the perception when you're a mother, there is that certain thing, because you have Lincoln, you don't think about Mick, and you should. But I mean, you don't want to leave. You don't want anything bad to happen. You want to be able to there to look at. So it does change. That is a known fact. But it's one of those things that over time, I was wondering whether you might get back, maybe not the endurance riding, but maybe just get out to a bit of pleasure riding in that. Could you see that happening?
Yeah, I would like to do that. And Mick's got a horse at the moment that he keeps saying to me, "We've got to get that horse in out of the paddock." And I keep saying, "Yeah, I'll ride her." And Mick says, "No, you're not riding her." It's like, "Yeah, I'll ride her." So
well, maybe that's
if Mick will let me ride her, maybe.
How long? What age? So were you when you decided to embark on a standardbred career?
Well, that's. I was very late. I wasn't helping Dad. I was going to the trots, and I knew what Dad did, but that wasn't my interest. So I wasn't one of those little kids that are, you know, fast working them at 10 or even 15. You know, I wanted to leave school. I was doing year 12 and it had always been easy for me. School had been very easy for me. And then it started to get a little bit hard and I thought, oh, maybe I should do something else. So I applied for a job as a working pupil in a show jumping stable in Kyneton, just out of Kyneton. And I was second choice. So I'd been looking for jobs. I used to get the Weekly Times and go through the Weekly Times and look for jobs. And Mum and Dad said, no, you stay there. You get your HSC, you stay there. And then Dad could see that I was struggling. So Dad said, if you're really set on leaving school, you can come and work for me. So I jumped at it, the chance to work for Dad. And then the stable rang up from Kyneton and said that the first person hadn't worked out, would I come? And I was already a few weeks into working for Dad. So I knocked that back. So yeah, a little bit of sliding doors there. You know, my path could have been different.
Yeah.
But I found that I enjoyed
What was going to
driving.
say? So, and obviously by the sounds of that, no regrets.
No regrets. Just I wonder, you know, how it might have been different. There's been a few sliding doors moments in my life. So I went to work for Dad for maybe 12 months, but what I really wanted to do was go to Marcus Oldham College, excuse me, and do a horse course at Geelong. So when I rang up about that, they said, I think it was $12,000 for the year at the time, and they said, you know, what have you done? And I said, well, nothing, I've just left school. And they said, well, you haven't got enough experience. We want you to go away and work for a year. And I didn't have $12,000 either. And I wanted to pay for it myself. You know, I didn't want Mum and Dad to have to pay for me. So I worked for Dad, I think for maybe, might have been more than 12 months, might have been nearly 2 years. And then I applied to go to Marcus Oldham. So I had to save up the money and get some experience. So I went down and I just got my licence and I was late to get my licence as well. So
There's no rush in Anne Maree, is there?
No. So I got my car licence and went down and had an interview at Marcus Oldham College and was selected to do the course. So I did the course when I was 20, I think, or maybe turning 20, 19 or 20, and loved that. It was like a year of pony club for me.
Yep.
You know, riding, learning about different things. We went to lots and lots of different stables. We went to New Zealand. I did work experience at Alabar, put in a month at Alabar there and learned a lot at Marcus Oldham. You know, I couldn't recommend Marcus Oldham enough. It's just a brilliant place. It was difficult for me to live away from home for 12 months, but I used to come home here over a weekend and work for Dad, and Dad would give me $50 or whatever it was and put petrol in my car so I could go back and live, you know, another week. So most weekends I came home, did some work for Dad, and Dad had a big stable at the time, so it was handy for him to have someone else to drive fast work of a Sunday morning and work and so on. And then while I was at Marcus Oldham, you had to do what they called a special interest study contract. So the first one that I chose was journalism because I had always thought that I could write and that maybe sports journalism was something that I was interested in. So I've had those opportunities. It interests me, Paul, that you had that interest but you didn't start till more recently, and I've had those opportunities but it wasn't for me. I found out that I thought that I could do it, but it wasn't for me.
It's probably a good thing for our industry, I think.
Well, it's a lot of hard work, and I know how hard you work and how much preparation
I'm not a journalist,
there
so
is.
there'd be a lot of people who watch the way I spell stuff, and there's no way I'm a journalist.
Well, from that, I went to the Herald. I think it was called the Herald then. It wasn't the Herald Sun. So I used to go to the races of a Saturday with Darren Bardsley and spent some time. I did the tips for the Truth. I wrote a few things for them.
Wow.
And learned how to do that, learned how to do a press release. If you go way back, I wrote some things up for the VSTA at that time. I asked them...
We will get to that at the end of this, but yeah.
I asked them how, if I could write some things. I think I might have written some things for the Ballarat Trotting Club. So, but I found from that wasn't for me. So halfway through the year, I said, look, I can't type. They said I had to learn to type and get up to so many words a minute. So I was banging away at a computer and wasn't very good at it, I didn't think. And so I said, no, I'm going to have to change this. So I said, I think for my special interest study contract, I will try to get my trainer's and driver's licence. So Marcus Oldham supported me in that. So I had to come back to Dad and say, look, I want to get my trainer's and driver's licence. So naturally, Dad was thrilled because he would have had me driving at 16.
If he could have, yeah.
Yeah, he always wanted me to drive, and I didn't want to do what was the obvious thing for me. I was, no, I'll never be a driver. That's,
Yep.
When I hear people say now, never, I think, well, you don't know.
Be careful what you wish for, yeah.
Yeah, you don't know, because it was just the obvious thing. My two older brothers had been drivers, and Dad was a driver, and I thought, I'll never be a driver. So
was that a little bit of
rebellion?
Maybe, but also back then, we forget back in the days, and my earliest recollections with you guys, you'd rock up with, say, 4 horses to Moonee Valley, and there's one race. So if you only had 3 horses in, you missed out, because Pete, Glenn and Dad got the drives. And I can remember a few times that happened, when I was early on, because they didn't have the amount of horses, so you wouldn't get a drive because it was just a lack of trot races, if you like, back then.
No,
No,
not at all. Dad wanted me to be a driver, always wanted me to be a driver. In fact, can you remember in the restricteds, you could put a horse in that wasn't qualified originally. You could go to Bacchus Marsh and qualify at a restricted
There's some
race.
fun and games done with those days. So
Yeah. Well, we had a horse at home that I was the only one that could get it away from the barrier, and it was all about standing starts in those days. So Dad actually rang up and said, if you can take an unqualified horse, can you take an unqualified driver? Can Anne Maree come and drive?
So hang on, was the
horse?
horse? But the horse you were driving was qualified?
He was qualified.
Okay, so that's not so bad.
So they said, no, you
can't.
They
didn't let it?
No.
Oh, the fun police, they were even in the vogue back then.
And Bacchus Marsh was so dangerous, I wouldn't have made much difference, It was so dangerous, but no. So no, Dad always wanted me to drive, but it was a bit of fear on my part. I think a little bit of fear that I wouldn't be good enough. Dad had been so successful, and Glenn and Peter had been successful, and I thought I just wouldn't be good enough. So
serious?
Yeah.
It's interesting, and I think the way as an industry we need to embrace a lot of these things. I know things have changed a lot for ladies. Was it because you're a lady, or it was just you wouldn't be good enough?
No, I just didn't have that confidence in myself. As I always say, Dad had confidence in me, but I didn't have the confidence in myself. Which is
amazing now, because I think your confidence level, although you're nowhere near cocky, but your confidence level when you go out onto the track, you fit in. You never have a second guess if you're in a Group 1 race, or a maiden race at Bendigo. To me, watching you, as someone that looks at the sport probably a little bit differently to other people, I think you never shy away from your position and where you are, and I think the confidence level seems terrific.
I think that comes from a bit of my background too, Paul, that I remember when I won my first race, Eric Loader, who was the clerk of the course at Ballarat, I won my first race at Ararat, but Eric was the clerk of the course there, and he said to Glenn, afterwards, he said, "Was that Anne Maree's first win?" And Glenn said, "Yeah." And he said, "I didn't know." He said, "She's so cool." He said, but that was...
Is that installed from Dad and Glenn and Mum?
I think it's from that I'd done Pony Club, that I'd
You'd won a
ridden
quilty.
in shows. You know, I'd done endurance riding. I'd been to Marcus Oldham and just ridden a lot and competed a lot. I didn't have those nerves that some people have because they just haven't done the competition, and I'd done a lot of competition in a lot of different venues, so
When
I
you
wasn't
were
nervous.
when you were driving, were you still endurance riding?
Yes,
Do you think that helps?
yes.
Yeah, it's
Definitely.
one thing from afar I see, and I think
Yes.
I'm big on people's outs or their reliefs, and I had a great discussion with Kate Hargraves yesterday, Kate Gaff, another person. I like running as an out. You sometimes need that out to look at things differently, and I would imagine doing a 100k ride,
100 mile.
100 miles, sorry,
160
160 k's,
yes.
would be such an out, if you like. And then when you get onto a horse, you'd be like, right, we've got plenty of time. You're saying before about Luke, he's last. Well, it's okay. We've got all day. We can get
Yeah.
there. So it probably holds you in good stead as well.
Yeah, and I think the solitude as well. I would spend hours and hours
Yeah.
riding out the bush. This was before I used to carry a mobile phone, so just...
Do you answer them?
But, you know, you got plenty of time to think, and I can remember just fanging along in the fresh air one Saturday morning and riding along beside a creek, and this was before we thought much about mental health, but I thought, how good is this? You know, how good is this for me? I'm sucking down all this fresh air, I'm riding a horse, I'm getting the exercise, and you can feel that it is doing you good.
Do you know how many people are listening to this and they're saying, wow, I wish I could do that like now or ever?
Yeah.
I think that's one of the great things. You say about nerves or, you know, didn't belong, and even back to your journalism, it's one of the things, and I can never think of this horse, but it was a horse that was a rogue, can't remember who trained it, but there was a big article about it coming to Dad, and it was a rogue, used to bolt back in the Moonee Valley days, obviously, and Dad worked the horse up the hills, and he got a name, and so did the Conroys, for bad trotters and badly behaved trotters coming to you guys to sort out, if you like. Was that ever a fear factor for you, because you're getting horses off other people that have got you know, issues, if you like, and they're sort of saying, oh, we'll just send this one to the Conroys? Did that ever come into a young lady's...
No, it's probably more so now than back then, because we still have that reputation and we still get the rogues, but that horse that you're talking about was probably Amazon.
No, it wasn't Amazon.
Was it Eden's Return, perhaps?
No, that doesn't ring a bell either. I can't.
Okay.
I can just remember. But it was Adam Hamilton did a big story about it. It was a horse that had a lot of ability, but just did a lot of things wrong, and was a rogue. Used to bolt from memory, and yeah, Amazon was before my time. But I mean, yeah, but I do know that's part of the story of the Conroys is, you know, your hills, like you're riding them, but the way you worked them. And I was always wondering, when you're saying those stories about, you weren't sure if you fitted in, whether that was something that was playing in the back of your mind, but clearly not.
No, it's just, and this is something that I think should be said to young girls or young people. You can do anything you want, you know, and I didn't realise that. You know, I didn't realise that there's a world of opportunity, and you've just got to step through that door, you know, and I just didn't have that confidence in myself. So, which,
as I said, is a funny thing, because when you watch you from afar, and as I said, I watch races. I don't watch races necessarily from a betting point of view. Like I said, you can have Margaret Ruth in a group race. She's best suited back onto the fence. She might be, you know, a short price favourite. And I'm looking, I'm thinking, Anne Maree, you got no chance, or even, you know, it is Billy for Mick. And I'm thinking, geez, Anne Maree, you want to get going, but you always held your nerve. Like, it was always one of these things. I was like, you know, you are a very gifted horse person. I'm rapt that you've won the Pearl Kelly, because I think the gift that you have, some people will say, oh, you know how to time to win a race on the horses, but for mine, it's, you know how to sum your horses up and what's going on around you. And it's quite funny that you say, you know, that, I suppose, maybe you weren't good enough, yet you are, for mine, you're just such a confident person. I really enjoy that part.
Yeah, well, I think you have to learn to back yourself, Paul. I know when I was getting ready, getting Margaret Ruth ready for the Killmore Cup a few years ago, I knew that she wasn't ready to travel off the fence. So
was she in the market that year?
Yeah, she was. And you can't listen to the chitter-chatter around you. People say things and I just have to block that out. I knew myself she wasn't ready to sit off the fence. So I put her in on the fence. She got held up. She flashed home and she ran second. And a few people were disappointed for me that I got held up. But I wasn't disappointed because I knew that I'd driven her the way that I wanted to drive her. I'm training her and I know what she can do. So yes, maybe she should have won, but I wasn't disappointed in myself. So yeah.
That's the way you come across all the time, and it's a bit of the Conroy way, I suppose. Win, lose or draw, there's always a smile and a laugh, like if it's yourself or Glenn or even Pete. And even talking to you this morning about coming here to the hotel, and we had to drop Pete's name, but we weren't allowed to mention his nickname, or we were, which we're not going to. But that's the way you guys are. You are always jovial. But I think, taking from what I have so far from this story, I think there's two things. One, you were a journalist. So I'm sure you've seen that other side, that you understand that if an Adam Hamilton, Mick Guerin, Jason Bonington, they say things, a lot of the times they say things because they have to, because you've got to sell papers, or or now their social media feeds or whatever it is. So you have to sometimes say an outlandish thing to get people to read the rest of the article, which I'm sure you've seen that firsthand. But then also this endurance side of you, where you're sitting last on Luke. And at the 75 mile, you're starting to come past some of these horses. No chance of winning. You're just wrapped that you ran top 10. So you've got a unique, balance, I suppose, that probably fits in and explains a lot about the way you are around your horses.
Well, I think that comes from the endurance riding motto, which is to complete is to win. So if you go in an endurance ride and your heart rate's too high, you don't complete. If the horse is lame at the end of the endurance ride, you don't complete. You don't get anything. You get to kick up the backside and do better next time. So I think I'm a little bit too laid back for some people, because I always think you've got to get there, and you've got to have the horse conditioned and prepared and look after that horse. And that's what endurance riders do. They look after their horses. The RSPCA would come down on them like a ton of bricks if they didn't look after their horses. So they're very good horse people, and I think that it comes from that I always think look after the horse first.
Do you think it's one of our issues? And I'll say racing, industry, as far as with the thoroughbreds as much as with the standardbreds, but more for you and I through the standardbreds. We measure too much how people are travelling by the amount of winners, and I spoke about this with Kate Hargraves as well, that, Anne Maree can't be going any good because she hasn't had a winner for 2 months yet. In life, you can actually be happier. But it also can be Margaret. You might not have had a winner, but Margaret Ruth ran second in a Killmore Cup. And they might say, well, if she had done this, gets across the line first. But in reality, you're happy because you knew you weren't right. You knew you couldn't. Everything had to go to plan, and it didn't quite go to plan. But that's not your fault or the horse's fault. It's just where you were on that day, and it's the way sometimes we measure not success and how people are probably travelling, and it's probably the wrong way to go about it.
Well, if I haven't had a winner, it's not from lack of trying, and that's something that people need to understand is. We are working our guts out day in, day out, and if the horse doesn't go any good, it's certainly not from lack of trying. I'm not sure that all owners or other participants understand that we go above and beyond every single day. So you would never have to think, is my horse getting worked? Is my horse getting everything that it needs? It absolutely is, and we are undercharging for our time and
And
for
overworking yourselves.
Yeah, and overworking ourselves, possibly overworking the horses too, but never underworking and never not doing the job. I hear stories sometimes about people in the old days who they knew the owners were coming, so they'd get a horse out and work it on the track so that they could see that there were footprints on the track, that they had worked a horse. Well, don't worry, there's plenty of footprints on our track.
Well, they'll be down there. They'll be down there right now. Changes and things have happened, and unfortunately, and I don't want to upset you, but the passing of your dad a few years ago meant for change, and it meant for a change with the Conroy brand, if you like, and the thing. And I think a lot of people just expected that Glenn would take over the stable, if you like, where you stepped up to that, and it was mutual. I think between yourself, Mum, Glenn, there was no animosity or anything else like that. But was that, again, back to the driving, was that ever something that was on the radar that one day, you'll be training the Conroy horses? Was that something that you had in the back of your mind?
No, not at all, Paul. That was Glenn's idea. Someone had to be the trainer, and Glenn didn't want it. But having said that, we worked side by side.
Yeah.
So
which you always did anyway, even when Dad was alive.
Yes. So I would have said that, Glenn was the foreman for Dad, and Pete and I were, co-trainers as well. But yeah, Glenn didn't want it in his name, and he's a trainer in his own name as well. So Glenn and Peter and I work together at Dad's stables every day, and the horses are in my name, but the three of us work the horses there. And then Glenn goes home and works his horses at his place. Mick has a stable where Mick and I live, so Mick and I are working as well, but Mick works his own horses. And I guess once I would have been riding horses, and that would have been my thing, but I've had to let that go because there's too much in being a trainer, a driver, a mum, a wife, a daughter, all those things. So that's my jam. I'm the trainer of those horses.
Jam, I love that. That's a word I might start using. Do you remember your first winner as a trainer, and what it meant? You don't remember that when after?
Yeah, that's a good question.
No, obviously it's not. I just wasn't sure if it was the sort of thing that may have stuck in you. You would have said, well, I've achieved that. But I'm sure you remember your first good winners because
well, I was a trainer in my own right before that.
Okay, yeah.
So I had trained winners
before that.
So
Margaret Ruth comes along, and Mum, like we keep saying about the passing of Dad and Bob and what he meant, but they were always a partnership. It was never, it was only Bob Conroy because you couldn't. I'm sure if you could have had partnerships, Dad probably would have been one of the first that says, right, we're getting one. We're going to be Bob and Pat, or Pat and Bob, probably the way Dad probably was in that day. But Mum, she must be so proud to see her little girl. I know how proud she was because the reason I knew about the quilty is because the couple of times that I'd been there and visited Mum, she showed me that picture. And as all older people do, she shows me it nearly every time I go in there. So
I knew you'd know.
She's such a proud mother. She always was a proud mother. She used to take you to the races, and you say about Luke eating the sandwiches. She used to have the handbag open, and Luke put his head in the handbag and eat the sandwich out of the handbag over the fence. So he used to work that out. But it is such a family thing. But to the journey that Margaret Ruth has probably taken you guys on as well, with Mum owning, it must be such a thrill for you. Yeah,
it is, and I'm glad you mentioned Mum because every single time Dad went to the races, Mum went with him, every single time. So when I was a kid, I was either looked after by Peter and Glenn, like Pete's 10 years older than me, so I was a little kid getting looked after by my teenage brothers, or I was farmed out to another lady in Daylesford, and I spent...
In a nice way.
In a nice way, yeah.
Farmed out sounds a little bit harsh.
Oh, no, a lovely Catholic lady that was a friend of Mum and Dad's and an owner of theirs. And in fact, I think when Dad went to the Miracle Mile with Lincoln Star, I spent 2 weeks living at this lady's house because they went to the Miracle Mile and it got rained out that year. So they're up there for at least 2 weeks.
Another week.
Yeah, so I spent a lot of time living up in Smith Street, Daylesford, not living out at home, because I think Glenn went to Sydney with Dad, and Pete must have been there working horses and so on. So, yeah, it sounds funny to say it now, and Lincoln used to whinge when he was younger that Mick and I were going to the races all the time, and he had to go to Grandma and Granddad's, and I used to say, mate, when I was a kid, I spent a lot of time living up in Daylesford with another family that were nothing to do with me, but that I had to be left somewhere. So that's what happened. Mum always went to the races with Dad.
Yeah, and loved it, and and she's still going okay.
Yeah, she's going pretty well, and if her legs worked better, like she's on a trolley a lot of the time. If her legs worked better, she'd come to the races with me, but. Mum and Dad didn't like me going to the races on my own, so Mum used to always come with me, and Dad would load me up with a couple of horses and say, go to the Killmore trials or the Kyneton trials or whatever it was, and Mum would always come with me, and Mum was sort of my offsider in the endurance riding as well. We had a series of Arabs that we bought, and Mum and I always bought them together. I trained them. Mum was my strapper. So, as I said, you need to be very dedicated to do endurance riding. So while I was doing that, I'd work for Dad all day. Then I'd work my horse at night, come in, Mum would have my tea cooked, and I'd eat my tea, go home and pretty much go to sleep and do it all again the next day. And that's why I never learned to cook, Paul. I was 40 before I learned to cook. I was never inside while the cooking process was going on. I was always outside.
It's lucky you married Mick Barbie, because I mean he's such a he's a 5-star chef, isn't he?
Yeah.
That's why you had to learn.
That's why I had to learn.
I could talk to you forever, and I definitely don't want to cut it short. As a lady reinsman, and we said there before about how things have changed and evolved. And, you see Karen Manning, what she was able to do when she came along the scenes as a young girl. You must be so proud, like, to be a part of that journey, even if it is from afar. And you must be, like, I hate to say this, but we are same age, so it's okay. As an elder statesman in the lady drivers ranks now, to see these young girls coming through and just the acceptance, like, of how it's all changed for them.
Yeah. And as I said, they've never had to worry, and I've never had to worry, and we should be thanking those ladies who fought so hard to get the right to drive back in the 70s. Diane Davies, Leonie Collins, Roma Pocock, Debbie Turner, who's now
/
Debbie Quinlan. Yeah. Those ladies, they put up the fight, probably Gator Pulicino, and they formed the Reigns Women's Association, which was very important at the time because there weren't facilities for the ladies to get changed. There was sort of this notion that the women couldn't handle the horses, couldn't drive, and they had to, bash through that stereotype and prove that they could do it. So, we've got Karen as a light in our industry who has shown all of Australia and all of the world what she can do, but we younger ones to the Diane Davies and so on, we owe a big vote of thanks to them, for forming the Reigns Women's Association and getting that for us.
You could imagine the likes of Pearl Kelly, who the award, like that we were just having this random chat about, how proud she must be, like sitting back, like obviously she's well past, but now, and seeing that, someone like a Kate Gaff is almost, one of the 3 or 4 picks for Group 1 drives. Now, like
sure.
to totally change it. Couldn't get a drive back in the day. It was hard to get a drive in a race against guys.
Yeah.
Whereas now, like I said, there would only be a couple of drivers picked ahead of her, if they were picked ahead of her for Group 1 steers. So they must be so proud of that. And I would imagine from yourself, you must be so proud of seeing the change and living the change.
Yeah, well, As my dad always said, he said the girls have got good hands, they're quieter, the horses run for them, and that's very true. So maybe one of these days the guys might have trouble getting a drive, Paul.
There is a race in New Zealand, and it's restricted to all male drivers. And I'm serious, but it's to raise awareness for prostate cancer.
Yeah.
But it's just the gimmick behind it. I was like, and they advertise it. I think what it was called, it was restricted to male-only drivers is the name of the race, to raise awareness for prostate cancer, which is great. And that's a lot of the other stuff. That's the evolution, I think, of the way the industry's going with breast cancer, pacing for pink, what they've been able to do, Duncan McPherson and Team Teal as well. So there is a lot of symmetry with how the ladies are growing and how the industry has embraced them, which I love. Before we get off your driving career and the potential next phase of it, your biggest thrill, like not necessarily your biggest win, but as a reins person, what would you? I've got you thinking, so I'll give you a couple of secs, but. Is there a race that stands out for you as a driver that you're just like, that was good? It maybe not even a win, I reckon, Nelly, knowing Anne Maree Conroy?
I don't know. It's not something that I really think about, Paul. I know when I won the Central Victorian Trotting Championship, which was a long time ago, on a Mario, at that time it was 2 heats into a final.
And they were tough. They were hot.
They were very tough, and we set Omario for that. And he won the first heat at Maryborough by a street. Then he went to Charlton, I think, and won. And then he won the final at St Arnaud. I'm pretty sure I've got that right.
Yep.
But we planned that out to the point that we had the perfect set of shoes on him. So after each heat, we took those shoes off him, put other shoes on him, and then put the shoes back on to race in. They were just worn perfectly for him, and we planned the whole thing out. And to win that was a big thrill. And another one, which, now you've made me think about it. We got a horse once called Sharp Umbro, and he was a claimer, and he'd fallen, I think, before we got him. He was a very unsound horse, and I used to massage his legs, swim him, do all those things that you do, all those necessary things for a horse like that. And I think we ended up winning 6 claimers with him in 12 months. And unfortunately, he got claimed at Moonee Valley one night. He won the race and got claimed, and that was probably the worst night of my career to have that horse claimed. But winning that first claimer with him, when we put all that work in, it was just an everyday claimer at Geelong. But I loved that horse, and I put so much into him. That was a big thrill.
You and I could talk forever, and I think we've been talking for a fair while. I don't actually... Yeah, we've been going for an hour, so that's okay when we could. But I think there's every chance, I don't think. There will be another chance we'll do one of these. I wouldn't mind even sitting down perhaps with Mum and yourself one day and having a little chat about that as well going forward. But I always get nervous when I do ones with Glenn because he takes over the interviews and I never know where they're going to... You say about being a frustrated journalist, or what he possibly should have gone down that path because he could have done a lot of things. But you're married, and Lincoln and Mick, your association, you are a family unit. I know Mick, he was at Bendigo last night. He didn't have a horse in. He goes with you a little bit like he takes over Mum's role, if you like. Make sure you don't go there. The Conroys are noted as a tight family knit group, aren't you? But you're also very open and inviting to everyone else as well.
I would hope so, Paul. We used to joke that if anyone left anything home, that we were the first people that they'd come to borrow something from, because we would hope that we're approachable and always want to help people. So
I can actually agree to that because little known fact, myself and Glenn have the same size head. So with helmets, I know it's come both ways. One of us has forgotten a helmet both times, so it does come in handy as well. But but I'm always next to you guys, so I've always found that part of you guys is just the way you are. And I remember Maree, when my wife first she was like, is this how it works? Because being a Zimmer, they were right round the back, and they didn't get a lot of people that, were familiar. She goes, how long does this go on? Like, all the time. It doesn't matter. You have Caldos on one side, Conroy's on the other, and, you need gear. We just go and borrow it. You just take it out of the bag and go and swap it and go from there. So it's just the way it always has been, isn't it?
It always amuses me that the B's marry the C's and the...
Well, I married a Z. She's just a total ringing now.
I don't know how you found her, Paul. I don't know how you found her.
There might be something in that. The next phase, if you like, of your, I suppose, career, and I'm not closing a career off or anything else like that, but you're on the committee of the VSTA. It's something you're passionate about. I know that speaking to you about quite a few subjects, but getting a little bit more involved in harness racing, is that something that's really passionate to Anne Maree? Again,
it's something that I have fallen into. Often I'm sort of pushed into things, I guess. So Ian White asked me to come on to the committee of the VSTA, and from that I was put up for the advisory council, and I really enjoy both, and it's been really interesting sitting on the advisory council because I come to it from a training driving background, and we think, oh yeah, we know everything. And then you get there and you hear other people speak, you hear owners speak, you hear people that maybe work in an office and have a very different background. And it's been a real eye-opener to me to hear other facets of the industry, where they're coming from. Yeah,
and it changes your perception. And
it does.
I know myself, like you say about this, I used to just have fun, but then I think it gets more important. And this, for mine, is one of those things to be able to capture why you won that award. Not so much sitting here to say well done, because we could do that in 2 seconds, but it's trying to get people to understand exactly why you won that award. And I appreciate today. I've really enjoyed it. Will you continue down that role? Will you say there about the advisory panels and that? Is that something you want to continue down?
Yeah, I think so, Paul. And I'm not sure which way I can go from here.
I reckon I could get you a job at Campbell's Comments with the microphone. I think you go pretty good at it.
Well, I remember that the first time that I met you, Paul,
the
first time that I spoke to you would be more than 30 years ago. We were both junior drivers, and I thought that I may have interfered with you. I crossed you too sharply at Maryborough one day, and I apologised afterwards. I said, I'm sorry, I might have tightened you up a little bit, and you said, don't worry, I took your mudguard off. So
I must have been in a good mood, because I was like, this could get ugly, because I could get a bit grumpy from time to time too.
So I thought, well, this bloke's got a good sense of humour, and I think it's commendable what you've done, Paul, that you wanted to do this, and I had no idea that this was something that you wanted to do. So I think I really commend you that you've started off just getting around with your iPhone and having someone hold that and speak to people, and you've come to this, that you're interviewing people and finding out about them.
This conversation wasn't about me. This is about you. And the question I asked is, are you going to go further? Which I could nearly answer. I would say there is that drive to continue to probably, improve the industry. And I say that not knocking any person that's driving it in any direction at the minute, but it seems like the passion is well and truly there, and you're that sort of driven person by the sounds talking to you, that if someone pushes you, you could even be the chair of harness racing in Victoria or Australia. If they, by the sounds, if someone says, oh, here's an idea, Anne Maree, we push from you in the right direction, you might take it. But in all seriousness, I don't think you're going to just walk away from the industry in any time in the near future anyway.
No, I guess I've got the experience now. I've been around a long time and learned...
Not too long, because we are similar age, so let's just temper that a bit.
Well, and learned a lot of things, and that goes back to you talking about the Pearl Kelly Award. When I was younger, I was nominated for the Pearl Kelly Award, I think 3 years in a row. So 3 years in a row, I dressed up, went down to Moonee Valley and sat up and thought, oh, please don't let me win, please don't let me win. I haven't done enough, I don't feel that I've done enough. So then eventually I found out that it was the secretary of the Bendigo Harness Racing Club that was nominating me. And I said, please stop nominating me. I don't deserve it. I shouldn't win it.
Yep.
So the funny thing about winning it this year or for last year is now I think I've done something. You know, I like helping people, and I always say to people when I'm asking them to pay their membership for the VSTA, if they've got a problem, come to me and I will take their problem to the next level. You know, I'll take it to the advisory council for them. And if you pay up your membership of the VSTA, I like to say you've got a voice. You know, the VSTA will help you. That's trotting, but I will help you. It doesn't have to be about trotting. It can be about anything. And I think a lot about young people and like a couple of times I've been to the races and a young person has said to me, where's the driver's room, or asked me this or that. And so I take those ideas to the advisory council and I say, should we have someone, you know, introducing the kids to the stewards, to showing them where the driver's room is, just giving them a hand on the day. Things like that. Could be anything. Could be a programming question, a handicapping question, whatever it is. I reckon I've got enough experience now and enough confidence now that I can take someone else's problem and take it to the next level.
Right, we are back. I've loved this. I've had an absolute ball. You're a typical Conroy. You make us laugh. Enjoy it. But I think you're dead set, an asset to the industry. You say there before about being nominated 3 times before and not getting it. I think probably the timing is right that you have got it now, because you're very mature, and I think you're just an asset to our industry, and I'm glad to have you as... I'm glad to actually be able to call you as a friend. So congratulations on the award. I'm going to throw it to you too, though, that we might sit down again and just talk trotters. Are you aware we haven't actually talked trotters? We haven't touched... There's so many things we can touch on, but I mean, it's more about you. And I suppose a lot of people are getting to understand who Anne Maree Conroy is. There's plenty of people out there that know you, but I'm sure there's a lot out there that didn't know a lot about you that you have found out today. And I think well done.
Thanks, Paul. It was a massive thrill, as I've said, to win the Pearl Kelly Award. And I've had so much feedback afterwards. So many people saying, well deserved. That was the thing. Everyone says well deserved. And I can't believe that people do know me, that they do know something about me. I didn't think that they would. And everybody has been so kind. You know, people have said such lovely things to me about it, that I thought I should write these things down, you know, because I'll forget. And like Matthew Gath, for instance, came up to me on the night and he said, you really deserve this. He said, the way you conduct yourself, the way you are, the way you drive and carry yourself, he said, you deserve this. And that was such a massive thing, I thought, for Matthew to say to me. His dad had just won, you know, the big one, and Matthew was kind enough to come and say that to me. You know, and young girls...
It has meant a lot to you.
Oh,
I'm going to let you compose yourself. It's one of these things I have worked out, that if I prattle for a little bit, you'll be able to catch your breath and be able to catch it. But I think a lot of people would, you know, back Matty up in what he said. His sentiments are what people, you know, and that's why I wanted to do this conversation, you know, have this interview, because I think you're one of those people that fly under the radar. You've achieved so much in the industry, but you've come through at a different era to a lot of people, and you've seen a lot of change in the industry, from a lady driver, but also the trotters. And that's why I said we haven't even touched on the trotters, and it'll be another hour and a half conversation about the evolution of those. But you know, you've come through a long journey, and that's, I think, what the likes of Maddie and a lot of other people would be trying to say, and probably emanating, that you're just this quiet achiever, but you just achieve so much. You probably don't think it, but I know a lot of people who know you think you richly deserved it.
Yeah, well, I couldn't believe that people were so kind, and even, you know, young people. Abby Turnbull, Taylor French, Alan Rickson, who I didn't know, I met that night. They all came up and gave me a hug and a kiss and congratulated me. And that people were so kind really struck me. And I think there are a lot of people in harness racing who they mightn't say, but they do notice what you do.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. Anne Maree, thank you. Thank you very much to the Royal Daylesford Hotel. Or is it the Royal Hotel in Daylesford? Or?
Well, I always call it the Royal.
Yeah, we'll just call it a Royal. I recommend it. Recommend their coffees. Just give you a little bit extra time, but beautiful place. They've got accommodation. They've got everything. So we'll say thank you very much to the guys. It's a beautiful little area to sit. Anne Maree, thank you. It's not going to be our last though. I've already got ideas going through my head while you've been talking about a few things as well. But I do really appreciate it, and congratulations on the 2021 Pearl Kelly Award, richly deserved.
Thank you, Paul.